Welcome to the Leading at the Next Level podcast with Dove Development and Consulting, the show built to provide ongoing support for your leadership journey. Before we move into today's lesson, let's make sure we're on the same page. We've seen firsthand how much more is required to provide authentic leadership to a team than to simply manage based on the authority that comes with a title or a position. What we've learned through more than 50 combined years of leadership responsibility is that taking the extra steps to serve people and earn influence will always produce results that barking orders never will. And if you'll stick with us to the end of the episode, we'll share how you can get a complimentary trial to a resource we've built that's like nothing else you've ever seen. With that in mind, let's get to work, and we'll wrap up the idea that it all starts at the top when everything really does rise and fall in leadership, and we'll talk about how you can capture the best results in your organization. Several years ago, I asked a client who was really struggling in their organization to attract and retain good team members why they treated their customers so well. They had a great reputation in the community for providing great customer service in their scope of work. Why they didn't extend that same treatment to their employees. And that client, the owner of that company, he told me that it was because he paid those employees to do what he told them. So that's what he expected. He was kind of gruff when he said it. And he also said that, gosh, those customers were paying him, so they deserve to be treated differently. And I immediately, him and his business partner, we just left lunch, and I immediately replied by saying, unless you're willing to change that perspective, you've got no business having employees. Now, here's where I'm going to tell you that didn't necessarily make for a good relationship forever for me and him. It ruffled his feathers a bit. But I'm also going to say that didn't mean I was wrong when I said it, because he absolutely didn't. Now, surprisingly enough, that statement didn't end our working relationship, because that statement had potential to end our working relationship right there. I did indeed attempt for quite some time after that, try to help him change that approach to really earn that buy-in, to keep and attract good employees, and until I learned that he had plans for dissolving the business. He had no reason to change. Now, I'm not going to go into any more of the ugly details, and I stress ugly, but I'm going to emphasize that it didn't have to be that way. He was poised, if he would have made some slight changes, to have a remarkable reach and do some great things and make a big impact on people. But he would have had to been willing to at least invest the slightest bit of effort into changing that approach. So the folks on his payroll, they would have had a reason to buy in and be part of a team instead of just being a few random people that showed up each week for a paycheck. Now, if we're genuinely interested in achieving those quantifiable, those measurable results that I talk about so often, by really dealing with those profitability killers that are having the biggest impact on our bottom line, the simplest solutions can often make the most difference, but it's critical that we start at the top. That's why we're addressing this here, because that's going to set the tone for everything else across the organization. And I'll stress it once more, just in case I've not been clear enough. This doesn't require some type of magical gifting. It's not something for the select few. Making these behaviors a part of who we are and what we do is really as simple as creating any other routine that we've ever built into our lives. We just need access to the right tools, and we need to make a decision that we're going to apply them. We're going to stick with them. Now, of all the areas in a business where I believe additional profit could be captured through more effective top-down leadership, I'm convinced that recruitment and retention probably matters the most, because it has such a long-term effect. Quite frankly, Cindy and I developed a lesson a number of years ago for that Executive Leadership Elite think tank that was called How Top Leaders Set the Tone for Recruitment and Retention, for that reason. And we made a business case in that lesson for how much money organizations lose when the owners and top executives don't understand the importance of their relationships throughout the companies. Now, while this also applies to everybody on our teams with even the slightest bit of leadership responsibility, and I'm going to break that down in a different lesson soon as we deal with that profitability killer, I'm going to say that the people at the top, the approach they take at the top, the approach we take at the top, that's going to make or break the business, just like the story with that client who ended up dissolving the business when he believed that he owned the people that he was paying. Now, And the hard reality is that if we don't give our best people every reason to stay with us, sooner or later, and it's almost always sooner, we're going to have a hard time recruiting people to take their place. Um, Gosh, that's a big enough challenge when we're trying to fill individual contributor roles in any given field, any given industry, but it kills even more of our profit when the positions that we need to fill, especially if it's over and over and over, are the ones that oversee key segments of our business. Now, before we really dive into the gory details of why Cindy and I really put a whole course together that really digs into how we build organizational approaches around recruitment, retention, and culture, let's look at one more thing, one more area, if you will, of where we'll see the effects of poor leadership from the top down if we're not intentional about how we address it. And then as we wrap up, I'll touch on one more valuable thing that we can do as leaders to really prepare our organizations to have a strong future. Now, as we build that top-down leadership model that has a positive impact on recruitment and retention throughout our company, we can expect that same leadership style to drive results in other areas, as long as we understand the difference between servant leadership and subservient leadership. And that's something I've seen people confuse all too often. Years ago, I heard Dave Ramsey differentiate the two by very plainly. He explained that subservient leadership is doing things for our team members that they can and should be doing for themselves, where servant leadership is doing the things for our folks that they cannot do for themselves. How do we equip them so they can do the things they have to do even better? And he went on to suggest that a servant leader actually expects their team members to meet and even exceed the expectations of the role, but they don't expect them to do things they're not capable of, that they're not responsible for, but they do expect that exceeding expectations. Now, a while back, I had an opportunity to be in a group where the program was a lieutenant colonel. He was overseeing our local university's ROTC program. It was pretty cool to hear, and he shared a number of different successes he had seen from cadets, as well as some of the challenges at large in the United States military today and what they're experiencing nationwide. Now, if I understood correctly, and I'm pretty sure I did because I circled back to it, he said that the overall recruitment across various branches of service today was down close to 40% from what they needed, what they expected. The part that really grabbed my attention in his presentation, though, was where he just kind of nonchalantly mentioned that his particular ROTC program had produced almost double the number of officer candidates that they were expected, and had as a target for a school their size. Now, when he gave an opportunity for Q&A, I made sure I wanted to circle back. Did I hear those stats right? And he said, yep, I did. So I said, so what do you attribute that overwhelming success? You're nearly double with what you're doing in your program, where nationwide you're just over half. And he simply replied with no arrogance, just a level of pure demeanor. He said, we've never dropped our high expectations. Good people want to be part of that. And my goodness, doesn't that hold true with our teams, with our families? Don't people want to be a part of something where they're expected to achieve and they're known for being great at what they do? Now, when business owners maintain high but achievable expectations and they practice a genuine servant leadership approach that really cascades from the top down, it definitely attracts and it retains some of the best people in their respective fields, but it also yields a level of performance that I've just never seen come from the carrot and stick approach. In too many scenarios, there's a misconception that the leader of the team should do whatever they can to ensure that their team members are happy or satisfied. And here's what I'm going to say. Let's be honest. You and we both know people who are happy if we let them just sit on the couch and eat chips. They don't want to do anything else. And we can probably each make a fairly long list of the folks who are perfectly satisfied in a role where they're not held accountable for anything. But when we invest the time and energy necessary to earn influence and we lead effectively, it not only impacts that culture and the recruitment and retention efforts, it also drives this thing called employee engagement. And some employees could be perfectly happy and satisfied just going through the motions without ever meeting or exceeding expectations of their jobs, of what's required. But an engaged employee is the person that really produces results, and they're almost always satisfied. Now, what I'll ask you kind of off script a little bit is, Which ones do you want? Do you want the guy that wants to sit on his couch and eat chips and do nothing else? The person satisfied with mediocrity? You want somebody that's really engaged and is charging hard to produce in the organization, especially if the culture's right and the expectation for even demeanor and fit is all there. Now, we're going to work through how leaders at any level in the respective companies can address this specific profitability soon. For now, my point really ties back to how that top-down approach leads to capturing your best return. And if we want to make sure that leaders at each level throughout our teams contribute to this return, we'll need to continuously work on building our bench strength. We can't do it all by ourselves, at least not for long. So there's a whole bunch of ways that effective top-down leadership can really reduce and even eliminate the profitability killers in our business. And as I've said so far, we're going to start unpacking some of those simple strategies for dealing with individual ones, the high-risk areas, and the individual profitability killers soon. But one way that we can ensure that we achieve the best possible results across the entire organization is by taking simple steps to make sure that the influence we earn with our teams personally that we've earned, it doesn't stop with us. We need to be very intentional about developing our leaders at every level of the organization. And to put it in sports terms, we need to build that strong bench. You don't see great football teams, you don't see great baseball teams, you don't see great basketball teams with just their starting lineup being good. You see a strong bench behind them. So when somebody gets hurt, when somebody needs a break, they can keep trucking, they can keep doing what they need to do. And gosh, even the best companies, just like sports teams, even the best companies experience some level of turnover. That's just part of life, right? If we've worked to build great leaders at the highest levels of our organizations, there's little doubt that we're seeing it show up in our profit and loss statement. We're getting good results. But if we haven't been just as dedicated to developing leaders in every other part, let alone every other level of our organization, I'm fairly sure we're not doing as well with recruitment, retention as we're capable of, and we're also not earning the kind of engagement that produces those best-in-class results. Now, if those two things were all we needed to be concerned about by not having effective leaders throughout our organizations, that strong bench, if you will, I would think it'd still be enough to really get our attention. However, that's definitely not where the issues stop if we don't have that good leadership at all different levels, at all different parts. Without that strong bench, we can expect significant dips in performance anytime one of our top leaders moves on, be that into retirement, be that to another company, hit by a bus, whatever. If we're not incredibly strategic about developing our next tier of leaders so they're prepared to fill the gaps as those gaps occur, any given profitability killer, even if we've addressed it, it can creep back in. Now, even this, though, it doesn't automatically ensure that we're going to be able to capture all the profit that's typically left on the table. Just like leadership isn't synonymous with management, we can't focus solely on providing our supervisors and our managers with access to leadership development resources and expect that we're going to see peak performance. For the best results, we do well to provide that same kind of development to every single team member who's shown that they have some type of influence with the people around them, so their message can really be in line with our mission and vision. Whether that person's a trainer, an informal department lead, a working job superintendent, or just a respected peer, their positive leadership skills can impact the performance. They're negative too, but we want the positive. It can impact the performance of all the people around them. There's one trap that we've got to avoid, though, when we do this. And we're going to need to really fight the urge to automatically push that person into a formal supervisory or management role just because they've become the best at what they're currently doing and they're respected by the people around them. All too often, we advocate that as a normal part of the progression process. It's just natural that this is the next role you go into, and we end up losing some of our best bench players. The best people on our benches from the role that they love, we lose them, we move them from that. But gosh, sometimes when we move them into a different role, they end up leaving the organization entirely because it's not something they were ever really interested in, but we've pressured them. Now, I'm certainly not suggesting, though, that we hold anyone back. I'm just saying that we need to make sure that when we do it, it's not because we've pressured them. We've done it because it's a mutual benefit. We've created a top-down model, and it's something that we can duplicate across our departments and at every level. And now we've got a chance at eliminating some or maybe even all of those profitability killers. The chances increase exponentially. So with that in mind, we're soon going to dig into how do we deal with so many of these profitability killers one by one.
Thanks for listening to the Leading at the Next Level podcast. If you'd like to go deeper into anything we've shared here, or you need continuing education credit for your professional credential, send us an email at admin@dove-development.net, and we'll be happy to hook you up with a 45-day all-access trial to our complete Leading at the Next Level program at no cost. The full program includes access to well over 100 hours of digital lessons, complete with slides and action-based assessments to help you capture measurable bottom-line improvements in your organization, and 2 live lessons each month with Q&A, so we can help you identify the specific action you want to take to lead your team more effectively.